Hello everyone. This is another Pioneer CTF 900 three-head cassette deck made in 1978. And I have repaired and refurbished this unit. I'm going to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly in just a minute. One thing that is important for you to know is that I have been thinking about a recapping process. We will talk about that during the survey of this unit. Of course, I will go over everything that I have fixed, everything that I've had to do to the unit, and I'm going to go ahead and start with that now. Now, this unit arrived damaged. It had been damaged in shipping. The gentleman I bought it from had done the best job he could, but he took it to one of the shipping outlets, and they did a very poor job putting it into a box and not really wrapping it. So when it came to me, this whole front end was bent. You'll notice that the lens, and I have repaired the lens, this is now glued back in place. The lens was cracked. The display didn't work at all. This mechanism was sort of bent. Thankfully, the plastic, this is very, very tough plastic. The plastic was not broken on it. So what I ended up doing to this unit is the same kind of mechanical changes or the mechanical refurbishment that I always do, which includes replacing the idler tire, strengthening the idler tire spring. You can't see it, but that's the action of the spring. In this case, this unit had been serviced at some point by someone. I think a service repair facility, and I'll explain that in a minute as well. When we do an overhead view, I'll do an overhead view with a fixed cam so you can actually see. But the pinch rollers had been replaced. And so all I had to do with the pinch rollers really was to clean them. I used the rubber renew that causes cancer. I used that in people who use it, not the finished product. I used rubber renew on these, and they cleaned up like they were brand new. And as you know, I send these off to Terry's Rollers usually to get them re-rolled. I didn't have to here. These were in great shape, but somebody had put some really crazy lock screw on this. That's the height adjustment, by the way. The height adjustment governs where the tape kind of tracks. And if this height adjustment is not correct, this will eat tapes all the time. But they'd used a lock washer, or sorry, lock nut, because the plastic or the nylon piece was able to bite onto the thread. That's not the way you do it. So I used a nylon nut with a nylon washer. I set the height adjustment perfectly on this, not a problem. Also, you can tell that these are red because I did the customary azimuth adjustment. Of course, as you know, if you've watched any of my videos, I do an azimuth adjustment based on a standard tape that I use. And then just for fun, I actually use another tape, which is probably one of the best tapes I've ever had. This is an Escape Club tape, and this tape happens to be on perfect azimuth and has a really good high end. So that then is my reference, and then my tape, my commercial tape test. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, you're going to want to hear music on this, and I've gotten criticism when I've recorded music, people saying, well, you can't really hear it over these speakers. Well, we're going to do a test. You're going to hear it over the speakers, but I will also put MP3s in here. So you'll hear the original MP3, and then you'll hear the MP3 that's been recorded on this. Hopefully that'll take care of folks who are questioning its quality reproduction. Okay, well, just to get started, we'll go ahead and turn this thing on. Now, the main display was bad. I pulled the board. The PD4004 was good. That's the chip that drives the segment display. It ended up being the display itself. I've unsoldered it and soldered a new one on. I don't think I've ever seen a bad display tube. The tube itself was okay, but the segments weren't working correctly. So I don't know what was wrong with that, but I've replaced that. All of the LEDs now work. So if you have FeCr, you have CR02, you have Dolby, and of course I did clean the Dolby switch. We'll talk about that. And the pots have all been cleaned as well. So what we'll do is, I figure since I've got it in this shape, and as you know, I always start these without the faceplate on because it's sort of my signature. I'd like you to see the guts of it before we put it in something. So that's how this is going to be sold. I did put new rubber feet on this because the old feet were broken from the shipping issue. So let's go ahead and try a tape. Now this is just a standard tape. Now, as you know, I always like to do tests with standard tape. We'll put Dolby on. We'll go ahead and give a listen to this. This music happens to be a reel-to-reel that I recorded, that I pulled and put up on YouTube. There's no copyright, so we'll go ahead and get that one going. This will, let me see, I'm going to want to rewind to the counter. And you'll notice I've polished up all the buttons and everything. These buttons were in great shape anyway. So let me go ahead and get this started. All right, if you're ready. And so we'll go ahead and start. As I said, this is a reel-to-reel tape that I had recorded. I'll go ahead and start that right now. I have Dolby on. I've set this a little high. You'll notice that the peak hold is a little high. We'll go ahead and play it. Okay, now we're starting over. Standard tape. Dolby in. Take Dolby out. Listen. Not bad for a standard tape. And if you'll remember, up until 1985, Sony produced the ferrochrome tape, FeCr. Now, you don't really get FeCr tapes now, but you can still get, believe it or not, you still get them used and new in wrapper. Since this is a deck that preceded that came out at the time of the ferrochrome tapes, you'll see CR02, but you'll see FeCr, but notice it's not showing. Well, the reason is that the ferrochrome tapes were the same as the standard tapes. There was no extra notch to automatically tell the system that it's a ferrochrome tape. Instead, you had that button. So we're going to go ahead and start this over again. I'm going to set this. We're going to start recording at 0. And let me get this re-cued. And here we go. Now, what people will tell you about ferrochrome tapes is it was the best of both worlds. Chromium dioxide, high ends, and ferrochrome, low ends. So it kind of pulled all together. I'm not sure, but we'll get a listen to it here. Okay. I'm going to take the Dolby off. So the ferrochrome tape certainly records and plays without any problem. I doubt you're going to be using ferrochrome, but if you choose to, you certainly can find them out there. What you'll probably use more than anything else will either be standard or you'll use high bias tapes, the what we call chromium dioxide or cobalt infused tapes. These tapes, quite frankly, had the lowest hiss produced by the tape media itself, and the tape themselves produced good, crisp high ends as far as you could go. These decks will get you around 15,000 hertz. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do a quick test of that just so you can see how that sounds. I'll re-cue this and we'll go ahead and get this one started as well. Now this volume control does not affect the volume of what's being recorded, even though it looks like it did. This does. This is the record input. But while this is recording, I wanted to talk about a few things. This adjustment in the middle is the bias fine adjustment. Turning it one direction or the other may have different effects based on the tape. Might increase the highs, might dull the highs. I'm going to turn it while we're listening to it, just to hear how it sounds. Going left seems to make it a little tinnier. Going right makes it a little less tinny. Tinny on the left, less tinny on the right. Just about right in the middle. So let's listen to what that sounds like playing back. I think you'll be surprised. This has no effect at all on playback, only on record. You take the Dolby off. Put it back on. Now, as we bring this volume down and talk about things, what's important to remember, and you don't have the faceplate to know, but this is source, this is tape and source. What we're listening to when we're recording is we're actually listening to the material being recorded on the tape. So what you were actually hearing was what was on the tape right after it had been recorded. It's a 3-head deck. A 3-head deck means there is a record head and a playback head sandwiched together. And we can set it so that when we record, we can listen right away to what has just been recorded. And that's what we were listening to. Now in playback, of course, you hear the actual playback of the music. But you'll hear this tape with Dolby sounds fantastic. Now what I will do is in the video that I put together, I will take an MP3 of that selection that I have, that reel-to-reel, and I'll put that on. And I'll also record an MP3 of whatever I put on one of these tapes so that you can actually hear the difference. Now for you to do a side-by-side comparison, you have to download both of them, listen to them side by side, but I think you'll hear a very good sound. Now, we're going to kind of do a little bit of a tour of the tape deck. I want to talk to you about some things that are going on with it. Now, within the tape deck itself, there are a lot of things that go on. I always rebuild the Takeup motor. There are all new belts. There are 4 belts in here. There are brand new belts that have been put in. The static relief spring has been returned. Now let's talk. That's the mechanics, and of course, you know, all of the mechanical pieces have been lubricated, and all of that's been taken care of. So from a mechanical standpoint, it's back to spec. Now, 2 things. This unit had been worked on at some point. I don't know if they had replaced the drive motor, but the drive motor connections had actually been resoldered. So I can't tell you if this is new. I will tell you it looks new. It looks newer, but I'll also tell you that this deck was very clean to begin with. Now let's talk about some of the components. Now this is something that I've just released another video on that I have debated, and I can show you with Capacitor Wizard what these are rating in at. But when I normally work on these, I say normally, so a few years ago I started just recapping. That's replacing these big capacitors on the power supply. Just replace it. That was part of the course. Take it out, replace all of these, put it all back together. Before I would replace them, I would measure the power coming out of the power supply, and after I would then measure what was coming out of the power supply. And what I discovered in almost every situation, the difference on what was coming out of the power supply in terms of the different power. Sometimes there's 5 volts, negative, positive. Sometimes there's I think 23 volts. These all have different voltages that come out. They all supply different voltages for things like the display, the motherboard, and the other things that control the motors and whatnot. And what was interesting was I found that while I was pretty feral about replacing capacitors because everybody said, replace capacitors, they're going to go bad. You know, you're on borrowed time. I said, well, wait a minute. Let me just stop and think about this, because every one of these capacitors that I have pulled in the last, I don't know, 10 decks or so, every one of these large capacitors, and they kind of look, I mean, this is an example. This is a 330 microfarad 50 volt. I think it's this one. It's actually this one here. Well, not only does it have a 0 ESR, which means there is no resistance being put out from it. There's nothing specifically wrong with the capacitor, but it rated better than some of the new capacitors, premium capacitors that I purchased to replace it. So it did not make sense to me to take something that's in spec, 0 ESR, out, replace it with something that was not in the same specification range. So this is 330. The new ones were at 350, 340 microfarad. Just didn't make sense to me to replace it. These, it seems, are really high quality capacitors. I'm not seeing them fail in any power supply. In fact, the only power supply I've ever had a capacitor that failed, it wasn't one of the large ones, it was one of the small ones. And it's entirely possible that it failed because there was a transistor and a diode that had failed in that particular power supply. I've only had one power supply that had failed. And I don't know why it had failed, but the semiconductors had failed, not the discrete capacitors. So looking at these, I decided, now there's something else. This is the control board down here. And the control board is all your logic circuitry. You know, it makes sure that things, that rewind works. And when it's at the end of the tape, it'll stop trying to rewind, all that. There is one capacitor on this board which notoriously does go bad or has gone bad. I measured it's in spec. So rather than replace capacitors on the control board or the motherboard, I've chosen not to do that with this unit. Now, that's power, that's control. If there's a problem, like I hit rewind and it doesn't stop rewinding for 10 or 15 seconds, that particular capacitor is a problem and it needs to be replaced. No problem on the control board, no problem on the power supply. Okay, that's 2 of 3 boards down. Now, the motherboard. Well, the motherboard is you know, either it's going to have a problem and it'll manifest in audio. It doesn't record right, or it doesn't play back right. Channels are off, EQ is off. You know, these riser boards are amplification boards for the output. Almost always, this orange capacitor you see here, these are almost always out of spec. Usually I think it's a 10 microfarad, and it usually comes in at 12. Well, this motherboard sounds excellent. Everything I record, everything I play back, I mark all my pots before I do any work, just in case I have to change the potentiometer. I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I did double check playback to make sure it was right, and these two had to be calibrated, but I did replace the display. No problem. The only thing I did do was I took this switch apart, which is the Dolby switch, because this is a very noisy switch, and I physically cleaned it. These switches all got the DeoxIT that I'll use. I use DeoxIT D100L, the good stuff on these. So they're all in great shape, no problems. So motherboard, no problem with caps. No obvious problem with caps. Power supply. All of the power coming out of the supply is correct. No problem with power supply. Control board, no problem with control board. Everything seems to be working just fine. I think this had been replaced. This was the regular drive motor. I rebuilt the rewind motor. Now the other reason I say that I think this was a repair, and I'm going to pause this and reposition the camera so I can point at what I think it is. Okay, so I'm kind of hand holding it so you can see. I'm not sure if you're able to see this line. This is a gray line that goes over here, and it goes way over here to a diode, and then it connects to another part of the board. This is an addition that was made after production. And what this addition did, I've repositioned the camera. What this addition here did was it fixed a problem with rewind, where you would hit the rewind button and it would sometimes start to play. Now, I never found the repair campaign describing it, but I found that bodge on several decks. Didn't know what it was until I read up on it on, might have been Audio Karma. They didn't know what it was for, but I knew right away what it was for because of the fact that the circuit had a feedback. This is a diode. This is actually connecting to a diode, and it's essentially feeding back into the circuit when you hit rewind or fast forward to stop the circuit from thinking that it needs to start to play. So a couple of things make me think this was repaired. The bodge, I think the new motor, I know because the motor had been resoldered in. Now, that's it. Now, I've spent a lot of time, almost 30 minutes, talking about this unit so far. I'm going to take a pause on this. I'll rejoin another video in where we talk about the unit with the faceplate on and everything else. So here's the reassembled CTF 900. And I'm just doing some quick recording. I'll turn it down a little bit. So a couple of things about the deck. You can read this in the reproduction user guide that I send along. But you have a timer start. You can set it to start when the power is on to play. You can set it to record or turn it off. This is for the old, years ago, you'd have a companion timer for this, have something on FM you want to record, everything comes on at once and it starts recording. Your view meter, volume meter, shows either a peak, which will show the peak, and then you'll have peak hold, which will then hold the segment at the highest peak, like that, and then average. You also have a memory. So if you set the memory, you have several settings, and it will rewind, it'll play to the end, and then it will rewind and play over and over again. This is not an auto reverse deck, but it is going to repeat play the tape. In fact, my testing is to let a tape play and rewind for about 12 hours to make sure that everything's working. If it eats a tape, then I start all over with calibration. I haven't had an eaten tape in years. Counter, it will do the same thing. It'll stop the counter and repeat. And then you have memory stop and play, which works similarly. Then you have your counter reset, and those are the controls that you have. You have tape, your monitor is tape or source. Right now we're listening to what's being recorded. This is actually being recorded on the tape. You're hearing the tape. Now you're hearing just the source. Tape and source. Okay. This tape is a normal tape. By accident I had left it set for a FeCr. This is remember the tapes for ferrochrome don't have any extra notches. There was no auto sensing for ferrochrome, so you had a button for it. This is Dolby, but it's Dolby B. Remember there was Dolby A, which was never released on decks. There was movies. Dolby B, Dolby C, and I think the last was Dolby S. You also have the ability to record from a microphone. So if you hit input and then you put a microphone in, you can record directly from a microphone. The logic controls are pretty simple. You've got a pause, you've got record, you've got play. You don't have to hit stop in between. You can just hit fast forward, rewind. It doesn't matter. Notice the tape has kind of looped up there when it stopped. There is an automatic tensioner. Notice it retensions the tape. And then you can play. And of course, you've got pause, and if you wanted to record, hit record and play at the same time. I've got it on pause, it would start recording. And that's the overview of the deck itself. Now let's take a look at some of the pristine aspects of it. Faceplate is in like new condition, with the exception of, and I'll give you some close-ups here, there's a small ding here in the plastic. There's a small blemish here in the plastic. This, which is only a dust cover, it's meant to go up over the heads when there's no tape in it. Looks pretty good. Corners, no issues whatsoever. There are no scratches on the face. The face plate, remember the lens we looked at before. Lens is in great shape. I cleaned that up. Now I'm going to pick the tripod up because I want you to see this pristine cabinet. This thing is beautiful. Notice we're in my workroom, but this cabinet is like brand new. Now the cabinet's like brand new because it was in another box. That box has been put up on eBay to sell separately, and I've done that because I don't want to risk somebody purchasing this and swapping the guts out with the box or not sending the box back. I've had that happen. So all right, so that's it. What I'll do is I'll also add at the end of this a recording of the selections that I've been playing, their actual MP3, and then a recording from this unit on. I'll use something like a XLSS. These are the best Chrome compatible tapes that you could get. I'll probably use one of these so that I get the highest level recording. And that's it. So thank you very much for watching this video. Certainly comments are welcome.
Thank you.